Welcome to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Sean Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, you're having an outstanding Friday evening, and it especially helps when the Braves were able to bounce back to get a 7-2 victory to split this current series with the Philadelphia Phillies. And as always, joining me is my podcast partner, Stephen Tolbert. Stephen, we've been lucky enough here over the past few weeks to be able to talk more often than not about some good Braves baseball, about some wins that have been a lot of fun. We're going to get into, Thursday night's game, which is going to be a little bit less than fun. But the big thing is that this Braves team is continuing to show, even despite disappointing losses, they have the ability to bounce back, and they did it once again against arguably the best team in the National League.
Yeah, what's up, Sean? Yeah, it's been good to see. The thing that I'm most encouraged by is that even after a loss, the offense has showed up in games, and that was a big indicator early in the season. Is they would win a few games, get some momentum, and then they would lose a game, and then for the next week they just wouldn't score any runs, and they would just have to scratch and claw just to be a 500 team. And it just seemed like the offense would just go completely missing for a week or two at a time. And in this stretch of really good play, probably their second best stretch of the season behind the first month, even after they lose games, and they have lost a couple of games here and there, the next day the offense shows right back up and puts up runs. And the same thing happened tonight. Last night was a brutal loss in a lot of ways. And we're going to talk about both games on this podcast, but a really tough loss last night. And then they just came out and, scored 7 runs tonight against a good pitcher that's, had their number in the past. So, yeah, really good to see. Really good bounce back win tonight. And yeah, we're going to get to both games here. But it's always good to talk to you, buddy.
Same here. And before we focus on both games, let's talk about one thing that has clearly been awesome to see is that it's great to see the offense, of course, bouncing back, doing well, making the most of these opportunities, especially against quality opponents. But Stephen, one thing that stood out as a trait of this team over their, last 6 times this last 6 straight years that they won the division is the fact that the Braves would always be a good response team. If they went a few games where they were lackluster or they had a disappointing loss, they would always bounce back. As you mentioned, basically from April through July, or late April through July of this year, that wasn't the case, even with the fact that they had, arguably one of the best pitching staffs in the National League. But we're finally starting to see over the past couple of weeks, the pitching, once again, is back near the top of the majors in terms of production after kind of, falling off a bit, in the month after the All-Star game. But now you're coupling near top of, the league pitching with good offense, and you see what is occurring. What now, I believe 13-5 over our past 18 games, 12-5 over our past 17 games. The Braves are finally once again winning at the level that they did in previous years. Well, when it was the offense that was doing good with good pitching, but now the pitching is back to where it was. Reynaldo Lopez coming off the IL has been impressive. Charlie Morton last night, he's put together about a good month of starts. This Braves pitching staff is back to being like it was in the first half of the season. And now with the offense starting to produce, we're really seeing that this Braves team can be competitive with anyone.
Yeah, I mean, even with the injuries, we talked about it last week or the week before, I can't remember, but even with the injuries, this team still has a lot of talent. It's actually an impressive amount of talent that they still have, considering what they don't have on the field at the moment. And the pitching staff has been. I think it's fair to say the pitching staff has been a surprise in some ways. I did not expect this group, especially after they lost Strider. I did not expect this group to be a top 3, rotation in baseball. But that's how good Chris Sale has been, and that's how good Spencer Swellenbach has been, and that's how good Ronaldo's been, and that's how good Max Fried has been. And Charlie's had an up and down year, but he's been more good than bad lately, I would say. And he's actually strung together some decent starts here lately. So yeah, it's really since Swellenbach came into that 5th starter spot and solidified that spot, the whole rotation really took off from there. And they did have that little bit of a lull right at the beginning of the second half. Some of that was some crazy, BABIP numbers that were just absurd that, finally calmed down. But yeah, it's good to see. It helps a lot, not having to score a ton of runs to have to win games. Last night, we'll get into a little bit about, some of the management decisions that went into last night's loss. But, tonight was much more of a a formula for what they do, which is the starter goes six, the bullpen for the most part nails it down, the offense scores enough runs to make it really a comfortable win, and that's the formula the Braves are going to use. And yeah, it's really good to see Reynaldo pitch the way he has since he came back from the injury. There was a time where we thought we were going to lose him for the year. Same with Max. Those two injuries could have gone very differently, and the season would have gone very differently. But those two guys not only being back in the rotation, but back to pitching the way they can, yeah, it's massive. I mean, it's massive for now. If they can keep him healthy, it's massive for October.
And it's always a good feeling when your team, no matter who they call upon to take the mound, they can deliver. Well, if you want a source that always delivers when it comes to your calls, you should check out Mint Mobile.
I love a great deal, but I'm not going to run sprints in the outfield just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. With Mint Mobile, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan. Purchase and activation is super easy too.
To get started, go to mintmobile.com/territory. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number.
To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/territory. That's mintmobile.com/territory. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/territory.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on their first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
So, Stephen, when it comes to timing, when it comes to just being clutch, I want to put the spotlight directly on you, Stephen Tolbert. And the reason why that is because earlier this week, you wrote a very well put together, in-depth article just simply asking Matt Olson to be Matt Olson. At the All-Star break, I directly asked you, Stephen, what's the biggest key to second half success? It's Matt Olson being Matt Olson. Well, Stephen, Matt Olson is being Matt Olson this week. But I want to expand a little bit on a point that I ended Tuesday's podcast with, in us talking both about Matt Olson. I get that his streakiness at times can be frustrating. But one thing that is undeniable, I mentioned that there have been several moments against quality teams where Matt Olson has stood out in his time as a Brave. Well, the numbers back it up. Matt Olson, since his time with the Braves, since the start of the 2022 season, is a top 5 hitter in the majors when it comes to producing against teams with winning records. He's top 5 in OPS, top 5 in home runs, top 5 in RBIs in those games. He also, the only player who has been better at Citizens Bank Park among active players than Matt Olson is Juan Soto. My point is that Matt Olson, I get that he has his flaws at times. He can be ice cold or he can be red hot. But this week, once again, has shown at any point in time, he can unlock an MVP level bat, and that typically shows up against quality opponents. He's been a huge reason we're 4-1 this week, and if we can continue to see him heat up, he could be an absolute weapon come the home stretch and hopefully October as well.
I mean, it's tremendous to see this, and I've said it all year. I've said it probably 10 different times on this podcast, but his role, even when everyone's healthy, his role is critical because of how much he balances the lineup against right-handed pitching, being the kind of the big left-handed bat in the lineup. But especially with Acuna and Riley out, his role just becomes that much more important. And it's just a different looking lineup when he looks like himself, when he is destroying pitches. He had 2 more hits tonight. He had a double tonight. He's actually had an extra base hit in 7 straight games, which is his career high. He's been red hot. Lefties, righties, it doesn't matter. He's been hitting everything. He's been hitting extra base hits, hitting the ball over the wall. He just looks like Matt Olson again. And, when you add in the contributions of the other guys, Arcia, Murphy had a home run tonight. Laureano, Merrifield, he's been a little cold since his 5-hit game. But, Solero, Zuna, like I said, there is enough talent, especially with the starting rotation the Braves have, to be able to score enough runs to win games. And it's just so much easier when Matt is Matt. Like when he is when he is on, it is a sight to see, and he can get as red hot as anybody. He's got like a 140 WRC plus in the second half, which is much, much more like Matt Olson. That's exactly like the level I expect him to hit at. That's his, I think, true talent level. The 160 he posted last year was crazy and a lot of fun to watch, but I don't really expect that again. But I do expect him to be like a 130, 140 guy. And that's what he's been in the second half. And you see in these last week of games, 2 weeks of games, exactly how good the Braves are when he's awesome and how vitally important he is to the lineup. Again, being the main left-handed masher in the lineup, it's just such a critical spot and great, good for him. I know it's been a tough year for him. I've seen more frustration out of him in the last month. Before this really hot stretch got going, he was like breaking bats, at the plate. He was, Matt's a very cerebral guy. He's not a very loud guy. He's not an overly emotional guy, but even he was getting very, very angry. And so it's good for him for busting out of it, for, reminding people how good he is. And, here's to it continuing all the way through September and hopefully October. Because he can do that. He can get hot for, a couple months at a time and carry a lineup. And I'm all for it if he wants to do it.
And you hit on a point there that I want to elaborate on a bit more, is the fact that we never really saw the Braves clubhouse setting. It has been talked about for years now, especially since Alex Anthopoulos and Brian Snitker arrived. Has been being one of if not the most attractive, one of the best clubhouse settings in baseball, and we typically never saw any type of negative storyline or negativity, panic, or anything like that from the Braves clubhouse over the past several years. But this year, on multiple occasions, we have seen some incidents occur. Players only meeting, of course. There's been some miscommunication between Snitker and the players. In terms of game situations, so on and so forth. But the Braves starting pitching, we talk about it getting back to like it was in the first half. The Braves starting pitching now, 19 straight starts in which a Braves starter has given up 3 earned runs or less. Franchise record. The offense is starting to get back the consistency of either hitting the home runs or producing with runners in scoring position. Overall, you have to feel that it's more fun for this clubhouse. They're getting into September. Yes, they're missing a lot of their teammates, but they're starting to see they're starting to see results come for all their efforts through all that they've endured so far this season. And this Braves team, what can make this Braves team most dangerous is them getting back to really enjoying playing baseball, because they know that their results are matching their efforts again. I think that has been a big reason why the offense has been successful and why the pitching has regained its success.
Yeah, it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing, right? Do good results come from a positive attitude, or do positive attitude come from good results? It is one of the more crucial parts of being a manager is maintaining an even keel clubhouse for 6 months when there are so many ups and downs. It's the absolute hardest part of the job. It's the part of the job that Snitker is the best at. This podcast is going to have some things that are said about Snit that aren't the nicest things because of some of his bullpen management, which I think is his weakest area, but by far and away his strongest area as far as being a manager is how he handles a clubhouse for 6-7 months and keeps it very even keel. He doesn't allow them to get too high or too low after anything. And at times that can be frustrating because it kind of seems like it's the same thing over and over, but in the long run, it is the best way to operate because you just cannot live and die. There's just too many games. You cannot live and die with every single one of these games. You'll burn yourself out by June. You gotta do everything you can to win the game, and then as soon as it's over, you gotta kind of erase it. You gotta move on to the next one because there's another one tomorrow and another one tomorrow, and that's what he's great at. Like that's Snitker's strong suit is setting the tone in that clubhouse where that's what's expected. That if you lose a game, come in tomorrow, do the same thing, get to work and try to win that one. And, all the players talk about that, and it is important and it is a big deal and it does help the Braves. And one of the reasons the Braves have been successful, I do want to make a point of that. Like that is what Snit is very good at. And that's what a lot of managers aren't good at. And, it does matter and it does help when you have seasons, especially like this one, where everything hasn't gone right. Like there's been a lot of bad, there's been a lot of down, there's been some brutal losses. And, that even kill attitude goes a long way to keeping your guys, keeping their heads above water and allowing them to get hot again and then, ride kind of the highs of the season as well as surviving the lows.
And that's where I think, Stephen, the conversation should go when it comes to, really discussing Thursday night. Brian Snitker, in just fairness, he deserves a lot of credit more often than not, especially with, how much the players love playing for him, how much he connects with the players. That is a great thing. That's a big reason why when I say one of the calling cards of the Braves over their, recent success, really since 2018, they're so good at bouncing back from, bad performances because they just love, they don't get rattled typically. They love going out and playing, and they're confident in playing with each other and for the manager that they play for. It's also important to give Brian Snitker credit. He has contributed in a big way to the Braves' recent success. Since that loss to Colorado 9-8, a few Sundays ago, right after that, he got aggressive, pushed a lot of the right buttons, and got us some big wins on that West Coast road trip that led to the start of what's been the best stretch of the Braves season. So the best part of Brian Snitker is how he connects with players, and he's done well to help put us in a position, again, to have the best stretch that we've had of the season. But once again, Stephen, you talked about it. The one consistent flaw of Brian Snitker is that it feels as if when there's an obvious matchup that he can set up for success for the Braves by going to a certain member or certain options in his bullpen. A lot of times he decides against that and just sticks with the option that's already on the mound, and it's burned him several times. It's happened multiple times this season. We've seen it happen multiple times in Philadelphia in the playoffs as well as in the regular season over the past few years. As much credit as Brian Snitker deserves, Thursday night was an example of where I feel it's fair to criticize him. He cost us the game. I feel that is a fair statement to say. And while the credit is deserved, and you hope that shines come September and October, he has to be better at playing the matchups, because we certainly cannot see that potentially cost us a big game in September and especially in October.
Yeah, so just to set the stage in case anyone missed it. So on Thursday night, the Braves were up 4-0. Obviously, they had jumped out to a lead. Matt Olson, the guys had given Charlie Morton, who started the game, a pretty good lead. It was 4-0. Charlie was not sharp really all night long. That is context that matters here. He walked, I think, 5 guys and hit a batter. He had base runners everywhere all night long. He was already over 100 pitches in the 6th inning, which is where this kind of took place. So the 6th inning starts. He gives up 2 hits. I think he got an out in there too. So I think it was 2 on with 1 out. And Brandon Marsh was stepping to the plate, and Snit had Aaron Bummer warming up in the bullpen. So Aaron Bummer was ready to come in, and I was not watching this live, and that's why I really wasn't talking about it a lot on Twitter, but I did go back and watch the whole game because I knew we were going to talk about it. So I went back and watched the whole game later that night. And I'm sure people were talking at the time on Twitter about how, they are warming Aaron Bummer up to pitch to Brandon Marsh. Like, that is the logical conclusion to what's happening here. And again, Charlie Morton was over 100 pitches. He had not looked sharp all night. He was, struggled with his command, tons of walks, tons of base runners. Even Snit after the games talked about how he was kind of flirting with disaster all night long. And so everybody just assumed that Bummer was coming in to face Marsh. Well, Snit leaves Morton in. Again, I think he's thrown like 104 pitches at this point. Leaves him in. He immediately gives up a 3-run homer, hangs a curveball right in the middle of the plate. After the game, Snit said it was a pop-up. The wind blew out. I don't think that's accurate. I went and looked at the StatCast data. He hit the ball like 101 miles an hour. He clearly hit it off the barrel. And he hit it like 385 feet or something like that.
I don't mean to interrupt. It would have been a home run in 20 of the 30 parks.
Yeah, it wasn't like a pop fly that went down the line of Yankee Stadium. That's only a home run in that park. Like, it was a legitimate homer in my opinion. 85 feet, 100 miles an hour off the bat. That's a pretty good poke. And it was a terrible pitch. It was a hanging curveball right in the middle of the plate. And obviously, at that point, all the momentum goes to Philadelphia. The Braves, and this is another important part of this context, is the Braves don't have any of their high leverage relievers available on Thursday. So now they have to protect so now it's 4-3. And they have to protect a 1-run lead with all of their lowest leverage relievers. And obviously that does not go well. Grant Holmes gives up the 2-run homer the next inning. The Phillies win 5-4. So that's how it happened. And, you know, Snit has a unyielding trust in his starters. Even a guy like Charlie Morton. And let's be honest, Charlie Morton is the Braves' fifth starter. He is their fifth best starter, and he has been pretty much since the day Spencer Swallenbach came up. He's their fifth starter. And when your fifth starter gives you 5 innings and 0 runs against a division rival, and what is essentially a playoff game, that's what these games kind of feel like. You just take that and you run, and you just got to get out. And I think there was an argument for not even letting him start the 6th inning, but he did. But once he gives up 2 hits, and now he's got 2 guys on, you got a lefty coming to the plate who hits right-handed pitching way better than he hits left-handed pitching. You have a lefty in the bullpen ready to come in. It's just a terrible decision. It just was. That's just a terrible decision. That's one you cannot make, especially in a game of that magnitude. These games mean way more to the Braves than they do to the Phillies. The Phillies are going to be in the playoffs no matter what, and they're probably going to win the division. But, the slim hope the Braves have to win the division is going to come down to these games. And so these are critical games. And to make that decision and to immediately get burned by it, eventually lose the game, it's just brutal. And I didn't love his reaction post game. If I'm being honest, he just kind of, it happens. You got to get your starter out of that game. And, a lot of this frustration comes from what happened last year in the playoffs with Bryce Elder and letting Bryce Elder just sit out there and die in game 3 last year against Bryce Harper. I'm quite honestly never going to get over that. But it's a blind spot for Snit. He, for some reason, has more trust in his starters, tired starters, than he does fresh relievers. And it's just something that, it burns him too much. And it's something he's got to get better at, in my opinion. I think most of the criticism about Snit is unfair and overblown, but I think this specific thing is fair. I do think this is his biggest weakness as a manager. And, it burned him on Thursday night.
And again, it's just, we've seen it happen in the past. We saw it happen last night. You hope it doesn't happen again. But it's these, every loss is going to continue to get more costly. Just as an example, the Braves, after this victory tonight against Philly, the Mets, I think, are probably going to win their game tonight against the White Sox. The Braves right now are likely going to end the night 3 games ahead of the Mets. And they're now 5 games back of Philly in the NL East. Snit pulls Morton last night, pitches bummer, likely gets out of that without giving up any runs, and we win the game. Instead of being, at the end of tonight, 3 games up on the Mets in the wild card and 5 games behind Philly, we could instead be 4 games up on the Mets in the wild card and within 3 games of Philly. Is that at the end of the series, you can make up a lot of ground, obviously, playing head-to-head with Philadelphia. But the overall point that I'm getting at when mentioning these numbers is how impactful one loss can be. And Snit just cannot allow for this to happen again. And Stephen, the other thing that stands out is that with the Braves having a pretty big lead tonight, they still use Pierce Johnson and Joe Jimenez. Joe Jimenez threw nearly 30 pitches. When rosters expand on Sunday, we're hopefully going to get Daysball Hernandez as an option in the bullpen, and maybe in time we'll get A.J. Smith-Shawver, and those two probably will take over roles for Luke Jackson and Jesse Chavez, who are known entities to Snitker. So you're going to have a bullpen that has Hernandez, has A.J. Smith-Shawver, Grant Holmes, Aaron Bummer. Snitker is going to have to start at some point trusting options that he doesn't have a history of trusting. It's going to require him to make the needed adjustment. I feel like it can be made. I just don't know how competent Snitker is going to be at being successful, but he has to make that successful adjustment before the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny. Like tonight, the Braves jumped all over Ranger Suarez, and Orlando Arcia had a couple homers. Sean Murphy had a homer. Matt Olson had a couple more hits. Ozuna was on base a bunch. Like they just had a really good offensive night, like we talked about earlier. And so they jumped out to like a 7-1 lead in the 7th inning, and here comes Pierce Johnson and Joe Jimenez, which are basically 2 of the 3 Braves' highest leverage relievers in a 6-run game. I don't fully understand. Like, I would love to see the leverage chart that Snit has or keeps or uses to decide how he's going to run out guy. Like, how many runs on the board before this guy gets used, or how many, how big does the lead have to be before this guy gets used? We saw Luke Jackson in a tie game the other day. We saw Jesse Chavez for 2 innings in a close game, and then we see Pierce Johnson tonight in a 6-run game. Joe Jimenez, like, it is very strange. I tweeted it out right before we started recording, but I haven't quite been able to figure out the logic of how he runs out his relievers. I remember AJ Minter pitched in like a 9-run game earlier this year. Like, it is very strange. And I'm assuming Snit just said, we have to win this game after losing last night, so we're just going to make sure we get it. But like you said, Joe Jimenez threw like 31 pitches tonight. He's probably out tomorrow. And you used him in a 6-run game. So it is very strange. I have yet to be able to figure out exactly the logic he uses night in and night out, but it just kind of is what it is with Snit. This is who he is. This is who he's been for years now. This has always been his blind spot. He's an unbelievable like clubhouse manager, and I think the bullpen management part is his weakest part, quite honestly. And I think he's a little slow on the, he doesn't have the urgency to get his starter out the way other teams do. Even tonight, like the Phillies got Ranger Suarez out there quick. They got Sanchez, last night. I mean, they don't leave their starters in to get beat up once they're tired. And you watch other teams and it's the same thing. Like, they're hyper aggressive in getting their starter out of the game and getting, fresh relievers in the game. And you can't do that all year, of course, but we're in, this is late August, we're in September. It's like, this is the time. And, it's just not what Snit does. And for better or for worse, there are plenty of managers who are worse than Snit overall. But this is just something that, Braves fans have kind of learned just to deal with. And again, tonight, your best relievers in a 6-run game. Oh, okay. I mean, that's just, that's Snit. And, we'll see what happens. We'll see, like you said, the rosters do expand. They'll get another reliever, which will help. Days Bell's a really good reliever. I'm assuming that's who it's going to be. We'll see if Jesse Chavez and Luke Jackson hold on to their spots. I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe somebody else come up and take one of those spots as well. But we'll see. They did get the big win tonight. That's what matters. 1-1 tie. Now you can go win the next 2 games and cut it all the way down to 3 games by the end of the series. So you still have a lot in front of you to play for and a lot you can accomplish. But yeah, the bullpen decisions the last couple nights are tough to follow in terms of the logic. If you're trying to connect both of them at the same time, it's a little tricky.
Stephen, I won't delve too much into this, but I do think that it's at least worth, just fun to discuss. We got 2 more games with the Phillies. We beat them head to head this year. I believe that we're going to, even if the Phillies do win the next 2 games, I believe that we've won the season series. But just in a potential playoff matchup, with our pitching, with our offense being where it is, we could potentially have Austin Riley and Ozzie Albies back at that time. How confident are you in a potential playoff series with the Braves versus the Phillies right now? Coming off the last 2 years, I mean, obviously the Phillies have our number, but just in a potential playoff scenario, the big difference between then versus now is the overall depth, I feel, of the arms that we could rely upon to throw multiple innings and throw multiple innings effectively, with the fact that our offense may not be as reliable. But just where are you in terms of a confidence level that if we were to face the Phillies in the playoffs right now, we could be competitive and potentially win that series?
Well, Shawn, I'm going to be honest with you, buddy. I'm an Atlanta sports fan. So my confidence level when it comes to any sort of playoff is always pretty damn low. Like, that's just how I grew up. And, I have watched this team and this franchise my entire life be unbelievable in the regular season and then lay an egg somewhere in the postseason. So, like, if the Braves and Phillies started a series tomorrow in the playoffs, I'd feel good because Chris Sale, Max Fried, Reynaldo Lopez are all pitching well. The offense is going well right now. Matt Olson's hot. The bullpen, Iglesias has been one of the best relievers of baseball. Like, I would feel good if you just laid out the logic of it on paper. But at somewhere in my gut is the Atlanta sports fan in me, and I would be sick to my stomach. That's just the nature of rooting for this city for so many years. But I do think the Braves feel like they have, having Chris Sale and Max Fried, having your best two pitchers be lefties in a lineup where, Schwarber and Harper are the guys you really have to make sure you control. I think that does matter. And having Chris Sale in general and having somebody that can go and shut down a lineup, if they can get to October with those two guys healthy, Sale and Max, and throwing Reynaldo, throwing Iglesias, like you do feel really good about that. Like you don't have to score 8 runs to win those games. You should be able to score 3 or 4 runs and win those games. So I have confidence against anybody if the Braves can get there with this group healthy and still clicking. Matt Olson doesn't fall off again, or somebody else get hurt, God forbid. I do think this team can beat anybody in a short series because of their pitching. They just got to get to October. They got to make the tournament, and they got to get there healthy. And it's October. Anything can happen. The Diamondbacks won 84 games last year, and they made the World Series. Like anything can happen in October, obviously. So, of course, the Braves could win it all. But just on paper, just with the starting pitching, the back end of the bullpen, the offense, doing better and better daily, essentially. I feel like the Braves could beat anybody if they got this current group, to the playoffs.
Well, of course, getting there is what matters. And something that definitely would help is that over the next 2 games, if we were to just split this series, right? If we just simply were to split the next 2 games, split this series, I think that would be another big boost for this Braves team, another 5-2 week versus what could potentially be, their toughest week of matchups moving forward for the rest of the season. But don't want to hone in on that because we've got 2 really fun pitching matchups. Max Fried versus Zach Wheeler, Spencer Swellenbach versus Aaron Nola. Probably the 2 most familiar arms, the arms the Braves are most familiar with in Wheeler and Nola over the past decade. Fried obviously getting back into his usual form. Swellenbach being one of the best revelations on the mound in baseball this year. That's what's so great about these matchups that we talk about, Stephen, when it comes to the Phillies and the Braves, is that with how good their pitching staffs have been this year, you have great matchups. And that's how we're going to finish this series. Stephen, how are we going to be able to get a split to end this series? Maybe even be able to win the series and get 2 wins.
Well, I mean, only if they had some experience against Aaron Nola. If they had seen him a few times, maybe they would have a chance. I mean, they've seen Aaron Nola. I've watched Aaron Nola pitch against the Braves 17,000 times in my life. So, there's no secrets. The Braves have hit him well in the past. They've also been shut down by him in the past. So, I would call that game a toss-up with Nola. And then with Wheeler, same thing. Like the Braves have scored some runs off him, but he's also dominated them. So, if you told me the Braves split those 2 1-1, that was probably always the most likely outcome when the series started against, 2 really good teams, a 4-game series. Kind of the median expected outcome is probably a 2-2 split. And of course, that just kind of leaves everything the same in terms of the division. And, if I had to guess right now, that's probably what I would say, that the Braves probably take one of these next 2 games and drop the other one. But we'll see. I mean, Max and Swellenbach have been 2 of the best pitchers on the team. Those 2 guys can certainly go out and shut down any lineup. But Swellenbach's a rookie. Max is, struggled with the Phillies at times in the past. So, I could also see it going the other way. I mean, the Braves could lose these 2 games. I mean, yeah, it's 2 games of baseball. Anything can happen. So, of course, they could win. They've seen Aaron Nola a bunch. They've got 2 pitchers on the mound who have had really good seasons, and it would not surprise me at all to see them go both throw really good games. The bullpen is always going to be a question just because it's been used so much. Who's available? I doubt Joe Jimenez is available tomorrow, which is a notable factor. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, it's not good. If they don't win, it's not going to be because of lack of familiarity with Nola and Wheeler. They've seen them plenty, and they've got 2 good pitchers on the mound to go up against them, and we'll see what happens.
And that's the great thing about it is that, the fact is that the past 2 weeks, again, Scott Coleman said it, others have said it as well. It's been the best stretch of baseball so far for the Braves, and it's given them this opportunity. It's given them this opportunity to where, hey, the most likely scenario is, are they going to win the division? No. Is a good scenario going to be that they're going to make the playoffs? Yes. But right now, we're at least able to enjoy what feels like playoff baseball. As Stephen has said multiple times in this podcast, the Braves have plenty to play for. And when they have plenty to play for, especially against quality opposition, at least in the regular season, they showed that they can deliver time and time again. I would expect for a split to happen. And hey, if we can win the next 2 games, that again could be a huge boost as we wind up August and head into the final month of the season. For Stephen Tolbert, my name is Shawn Coleman. You can find him at _outliers on Twitter, myself at StatsSAC, the Foul Territory Podcast Network. You can find it at Foul Territory across all forms of social media, as well as at Hammer Territory across all forms of social media. Until next time, for Stephen Tolbert, my name is Shawn Coleman. Go Braves. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory Podcast.